Good evening, everyone. My name is Ricardo Ferreira, and it's an absolutely honor to welcome you on behalf of the Visual Effects Society to this incredible gathering of visionaries, creators, and innovators. A heartfelt thank you to each one of you being here tonight to celebrate the art, technology that push the boundaries of storytelling. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Adam and Territory Studios for their invaluable support and contribution to our industry. A big thank you to Klaudija and Saint for starting to organize this event. We truly appreciate your dedication and passion. And of course, a warm welcome to our esteemed guest speakers who will share their insights and expertise with us. This evening promises to inspire, engage, and celebrate the future of visual effects, gaming, and let's make it unforgettable. With this, I would like to call our outstanding moderator, Saint Walker.
Hi, folks, and thank you very much. And for the people online, we're standing here at the side of the room. So it may seem a bit odd, but that's what we're doing because we love our online audience as well. So thank you for bearing with that. And hopefully you won't crick your neck too much looking at the beautiful talent we have arrayed for you. So this is about visual effects artistry for the film and gaming industry, where we explore the commonality of difference in skills, culture, and roles between the worlds of games and VFX, and hopefully cover the new opportunities that are possible when games meets VFX. My name is St. John Walker, and I'll be chairing the proceedings and introducing our guests. And I'm going to start off with our keynote speaker from Territory, Ryan Hays, who's the creative director here. He's going to be talking about games and VFX convergence and working with games clients. Ryan has worked on feature films like Lift, Fast X, or Fast 10 if you prefer that, The Kitchen, The Creator, Venom, The Last Dance, and as well as working on video games clients like Turn 10, Jar of Sparks. And he's also worked on Call of Duty Black Ops 6, I believe. With 20 plus years in the industry, Ryan has been fortunate enough to work and collaborate with some of the world's top brands. So let me stop yakking now and hand over to Ryan. Over to you, Ryan.
Okay, hopefully this works. Hello. This is a 30-minute talk, which I need to get through in 10 minutes. Okay, so we're going to go straight away. The first one is the show reel. So can we go on to that one? Have we got audio? I hope we do. There we go. Okay. Long reel for a long project. So the next page, which is task. The task was actually, it started out as a small thing. Next page, please. Or rather, and then the other way. There we go. Okay, next one. There we go. To create a dozen bespoke films and drive the single-player narrative. So in-game cinematics, or what they used to be called as load films, were used to load the level. They're not used that anymore, so which is nice. So we have as much time as we want to explore the narrative, which is kind of a nice idea. They had two bespoke sort of ideas that they wanted to get through, which was the most successful games they've had before, which is the next frame, please, Manuel, is Call of Duty Black Ops and Call of Duty Cold War. They're the most two successful narrative-wise that has been in the past. So, which is kind of nice because I worked on Black Ops 1 and I've worked on 5 Call of Duty since then. This is my 6th one. It's kind of nice getting back to it after, I'm not sure I should say because it's going to say how old I am, but 10 years I think was the last one I worked on. And in that time actually between working on games all the time and working on games now, I worked for a visual effects company called MPC, turned into the mill, all that sort of stuff. So I had both sides of the coin of this visual effects and games industry. But yeah, we had to establish what was successful about both of them really. Call of Duty was very, not basic, but it was very graphic design heavy with a lot of archive imagery of Vietnam, which is not a nice thing to look at, of real world archive footage. It was kind of scarred a few people who actually looked into it. Cold War, which is some of my friends actually did, which was kind of nice because I could ask them a few questions, which was strong, really strong storytelling, very cinematic and era appropriate sets. So we went, oh, okay, those two pillars is what we want to base our ideas off. Next frame, please. Manuel. Left is, oh, sorry, gone too far. Back another one. Left is Black Ops, right is Cold War. So you can see the difference. One's very graphical, motion graphic-y, one's very cinematic and CG. Next one. The whole basis was typography. Typography is a big thing for me. As a graphic designer, as a designer, typography is our basis for everything. So type is a communication vehicle. So both in what they mean literally, but also what they can express with the other meanings that are behind it, they're based on. So that was something that we pushed a lot. Next one, which is, this game is based in 1991. So we wanted to go back, which is actually when I started my career in the early 90s. So it was nice actually getting back to it. This is when I was at art school. Neville Brody, Ray Gunn, David Carson, that type of stuff, which is all letter sets. It's done by hand. It's all that sort of stuff. It's getting really into the thick of it. No digital assets, maybe photography, but then you print it out and you cut it out. It comes with, that type of thing. So the client loved this. The client wanted to build our basis of our forward thinking, our narrative, our look and feel off of this. Next one, please. So the design. So we come up with two themes. The design theme was construction in reverse, which is at that point in time in the late 80s, there was a methodology called destructionism, which is something that was in early 90s. Tech was technology, webs. Where the web started, people started going into this pop culture thing. Design in the other way was actually going in reverse. They're trying to go backwards, trying to become more, deconstructing all these sort of elements that become the narrative. So we use that as a device going forward for all the design. Next one. I work with a lot of young designers. I had to actually teach them to not use digital, which is kind of hard for them. But in the end, they loved it. I brought some letter sets in, which are very expensive these days, which sucks. They needed to paint, they need to use inks, they need to use spills. You've got a photocopier in the studio, which is, I think, is something they've never used before. David, I'm not sure you know this, that no one's ever used a photocopier before. So I actually started out by actually photocopying my face and then streaking it with methylated spirits. And they worked out, oh, this is what we can do with it. So we started we had this table in the middle of the studio. We started using that as our working out area. So we kind of started creating fonts, started creating textures and things like that, which is, if you can go to the next frame, which for Activision is a major thing. Is that going to play? Can you play that one? Activision in the past have had problems with licensing. Licensing become an issue with assets and things like that, where they've got hit and they've got hit bad. So everything we needed to create it ourselves in this typography, textures, even some of the stories we needed to create ourselves. So that was one thing why we created and exported out textures and had a library of assets we could use going forward. Next one. Yeah, the bottom there. There you go. And the animation theme was, so early on I had to come up with a device that was a way to put the viewer in the position of the character they're playing. So there's a device called the Mind's Eye that's used in the military and used in sports enthusiasts and sport athletes. That everything so before a game, before a mission, you're told the plan and you visualize that concept. So we wanted to try and get the same aesthetic through to the viewer. So we'd strip back, which was also part of that destructionism sort of theme, is to strip back the narrative and strip back the idea and just focus on the main narrative elements you need to think of going through the game. Because another thing that the client wanted to do was never hint at what's coming up with you in the next level. So we need to strip back to the bare parts it was. Do you want to go to the next one? So like in the top left there, one of the ideas for the level was there's a building out in the middle of a forest that you needed to go to and extract a, I think it was some, oh God, I haven't played it for a while, something that you need to extract. So, okay, right, if we bring that back to its bare parts, there's a road, there's a door you need to get to. It doesn't matter what the door, the building is, it's the door you need to get through. So we started stripping back everything to its core parts. The bottom right is from the heist level where you needed to break into a vault. Okay, let's deconstruct the vault entrance point into its components, things like that. Top right is the hit that you needed to do on a level. So we didn't know what his image looked like. So we thought, okay, using the previous games of your information that you got through the previous games, how can you construct a collage of that target? So it was all those little elements that sort of help you through the mission, but actually hint at what's coming up and don't project the full mission, as it were. Next one. It's all about layering. Motion graphics, even visual effects and gaming, it's all about the multiple layers that you're layering, which is also part of the story. Stories are always, they're never linear. There's always multiple layers of the story that, you know, continue the narrative going forward. So we wanted to add that with textures, typography, game assets, footage, and also clips that we were giving from, that we could get sign off from Activision itself. Next one. This is just an example of the layering system we did. We used a lot of base effects, so we could, one thing, because I think we rendered out 30 minutes of footage in the end. Everything needed to have its visual language portrayed over every film. So we tried to give a base workflow for everything, so it projected the same imagery, the same textures all the way through the sequence. Next one. Build. This is coming into the visual effects side of things. We had game assets coming through from Activision, and a lot of those needed upresing. So we needed to do that and also a lot of the elements needed to be slightly changed because of licensing. Some of the elements you could use in a game, but you can't use in an animation short film. It's kind of weird, but that's the way the licensing works. So we needed to give that a different sort of look and feel, which is the build assets needed to contain energy. They needed to contain movement, which is like a tank or something like that. The immersion side of things is the scenes itself. We did a whole rebuild of the Capitol building in Washington, but we cut down a lot of the elements that they weren't needed. You know, they weren't needed to actually tell the story. So, but we still needed to immerse the player in that environment. And some people who have actually contacted us in general from that point have actually said they knew it was the Capitol building straight away. So that's the immersion side of things. Not trying to reinvent the wheel. A lot of our guys try and over-establish the effect or the scene and things. I always keep telling them, just build it back, just pull it back to the core narrative, because these gamers, they have a really short attention span, you know what I mean? So we can't overdo it. Next frame. Here you go, that's the Capitol building in the corner there. We got the bottom right went really well with all the guys who played it. I don't know why, I think they found a hidden message, which we didn't actually add, but there's actually 5 people in the crew for Call of Duty, there's always been, and we gave them skulls, and they thought by the end of the game they'd all die, but they didn't. But there's something that we put a lot of Easter eggs in it. There's a lot of text that means from prior games, maybe future games. There's other coordinates that we've put in the game, which mean things I'm not allowed to say anything, but they could be coming in DLCs, so that sort of side of things. Next one, I'll try and get through it quickly. Some build elements, which is a tank. Yep, good old tank. You need a tank in every Call of Duty. But that's the sort of the build, visual effects side of things, and then pulling it into the motion graphic sequence. Next one. Highlight. The highlight of the project was something that's never done in Call of Duty before, which is a title sequence. Title sequence in games is sort of hit and miss, really. I think the only one that's probably, oh God, I don't even know. There's never really been a good title sequence for any game, to be honest with you. But this one was a passion project for the actual client. They really wanted us to do this. I didn't think it'd work, but it did in the end because a lot of our guys really wanted to do it really well, so that was cool. So this is the title sequence for the actual whole campaign. So this is trying to tell the story before you start the game. So it starts in 1989 and finishes in 1991.
An entire class of U.S. Soviet nuclear missiles is eliminated. Means that the era of nuclear disarmament has begun. We will stay the course and we will succeed. No doubt. Operation Desert Storm is working.
And then I think the next page is just thank you. This wouldn't have been possible without the team we had on board, but also getting the client on board early in the whole sequence, because this was 2 year. I started this in 2022, and we just finished, and we're still working on stuff. But the client let us do whatever we wanted after the 3rd month because they understood where we were going, and that they had faith in us to do what they wanted. So I don't think this would have been possible if that didn't happen. So yeah, thank you.
Ryan, thank you very much. Thank you. So let's now go back to, after that sterling presentation, and hopefully Ryan will be around for the Q&A later on if you have any questions. But now we're going to go back to fundamentals. We've got Helen Kaur and Hayley Brant, who are going to talk about the game's landscape and opportunities. So what's it like working in games? Helen Kaur was previously lead UI artist at Rocksteady and Ubisoft, and Hayley was also previously at Rocksteady as senior UI, UX, and a senior graphic artist at Rare. They'll introduce us to the game's landscape and opportunities. They'll tell us the fundamentals of working in games and what you need to know to get by. Helen is now UI Art Director at Hundredstar Games, and Hayley Brant is UI UX Brand Director at Lucid Games. Helen and Hayley, please take it away.
Thank you. I'll just say I've been playing Black Ops 6 and it's awesome.
I get motion sickness, so I can't play.
So yeah, we're here to give you an insight into what it's actually like working in games. And we'll tell you why you should consider joining us in this exciting industry. So we're pretty much going to try and convince you. But we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves. So yep, I'm Hayley. So I'm the UI Director and Brand and UX Director at Lucid Games. Next slide.
We have a lot of slides.
Yeah, so I grew up in Yorkshire and I began my journey studying graphic design, which I think It's what most UI people in games did. And after 8 years working in design agencies, I jumped at the chance to actually join the games industry. So that was 18 years ago, and I've worked with a lot of studios, both full-time and freelance, and I've gained a wealth of experience across different projects and teams. So yeah, for the past 3 years I've been at Lucid Games, and I'm the UI UX brand director. I'm leading the creative efforts on some really cool projects, including one called The Last Sentinel. If you get a chance to look at it, and you're into like cyberpunk, and my territory friends know all about it as well. Next slide.
Yes, hello, I'm Helen, the UI art director at Hundredstar Games. Yeah, so I'm from Singapore. I lived in Finland for about 10 years, and then I moved to London 8 years ago to work for Rocksteady. I've always been a gamer since I was a kid. I didn't really know how to get into games. I studied graphic design in Polytechnic, and I worked as a graphic designer for many years and worked in a user experience team for apps. That's how I found out about UI, like as an actual field. And then eventually there was a job as a UI artist in a game studio. It was like 2011, and so I got a job there and been working in games ever since.
So why games? So we didn't want to just limit this discussion to just our perspective on how and why games could be a viable option for you. So we've also reached out to our friends and our peers and asked for their opinions as well. Some who have actually made the transition from film to games, and some that have been in games all their career. And we thought by including these diverse viewpoints will provide a well-rounded exploration of the opportunities and insights that games could offer.
So yeah, well, yeah, the people are great. Like most game developers will tell you they love working in games because of the people. The culture in game development has always been incredibly welcoming and open-minded, and you end up forming really long-lasting friendships along the way. And I mean, this has been true for us. Many of our most closest and meaningful friendships have been formed through working in games. And these are the few of the friends we've made over the years from games, specifically.
Okay, next.
Yeah, and speaking of friendships, yeah, it's just a quick thing just about Hayley and I and why we are presenting together. So we work together in Rocksteady, we live together, we commuted together, and yeah, we're still best friends. So people used to mix our names up all the time, so we just came up with Helen. Yeah.
Feel free to, if you speak to us later, call us Helen, because it's easier, you won't remember. So yeah, game development is inherently collaborative. It requires close cooperation with professionals from a wide range of disciplines beyond your own expertise. So the long development cycles typical of games means you spend a significant time with your team, and you often form deep, meaningful bonds in the process. It's a truly joint effort where everyone's contributions matter, and you never ever feel like just a cog in a big machine. The work environment is not only creatively fulfilling, but it's honestly genuinely enjoyable as well. There's a strong sense of mutual respect among peers, and the industry attracts some of the most passionate, creative, and kind people you'll ever meet. So working in games feels like being part of a vibrant community where collaboration and creativity thrive.
Yeah, and majority of the roles in games are permanent, reflecting the long-term investment studios have in their people. And a lot of them have very competitive benefits, including physical and mental health support and generous perks, and from promotions, training opportunities, and the industry is usually committed to encouraging professional growth and well-being. And on top of that, you'll be in a community of other exceptionally talented developers who are not only skilled but eager to share their knowledge and collaborate. So it makes for a very nice environment where you can keep learning your craft and keep growing.
It's also really rewarding. So the experience of shipping a game, it's awesome. It's the culmination of countless hours of effort from every department, all coming together to create a finished product in one of the most engaging and interactive mediums out there. Seeing players dive into a world you've built and knowing they'll spend 10, 20, 200 plus hours exploring it is a feeling like no other, and it never gets old. For story-driven games, the impact can be even more profound. So you're crafting experiences that can evoke emotions as powerful and memorable as a really good film or TV series. Knowing your work has the potential to resonate deeply with players, leaving a lasting impression, makes all the hard work worthwhile. And as accessibility takes centre stage in game development, we also can welcome a broader audience, ensuring that everyone can enjoy the same rich experiences as every other gamer.
And over the past decade, we've witnessed remarkable technical advancements, and it's been incredible to be part of that evolution. Games are constantly pushing boundaries, improving and redefining what's possible. With every new release and generation, we see significant leaps forward, whether in visual fidelity, technological innovation, or narrative depth. It's exciting to imagine where the industry can go to next as it continues to evolve.
Money. That's all we care about. So with over 3 billion active gamers worldwide, the games industry generates more than $200 billion annually. That surpasses the combined global revenue of film, television and music combined. In the UK alone, the games industry is worth an impressive $8 billion, and it continues to show steady growth. That said, the past couple of years have been a little bit tough for game developers, with redundancies affecting studios globally. It's like the post-COVID dip, it's known as. However, the resilience of the industry is remarkable, and from these challenges, we often see a wave of new studios emerging, bringing fresh ideas and innovation, and it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, but it will remain dynamic and forward-looking.
So what you should know about working in games? You already know more than you might think. First and foremost, don't be afraid of changing industries. Many of the skills you've developed are directly applicable to game development. Over the past decades, both film and games have evolved to the point where there is a significant overlap in the skills required. So while you'll need to learn processes specific to game engines and game development, your core expertise such as modeling, rigging, texturing, lighting, and shading will translate seamlessly. These skills often rely on the same tools, similar software, and foundational principles, making the transition much more approachable than it may initially seem.
So what should you learn? So take time to research the discipline that you're interested in and identify where your skills overlap and what's required. So look for transferable skills and crossovers that could give you a head start. If you discover gaps in your knowledge, don't worry, there's lots of resources available from online courses, YouTube tutorials, GDC talks, all of which can help you build out your skills. And don't hesitate to explore other disciplines along the way if they align better with your current expertise. Additionally, learning to use a real-time engine like Unreal or Unity can be a game changer. Pun not intended. Start with a small project to get a hands-on understanding of the fundamentals of game development, whether it's focused on your specific field or more of a broader exploration. It will give you a valuable insight into how games are made and help you build confidence in your abilities.
In games, you'll find yourself collaborating with or interacting across various departments and disciplines. Having a basic understanding of these areas, how these areas operate can be incredibly beneficial, enabling smoother communication, more effective teamwork, and a greater appreciation of how each piece contributes to the final product.
So onto the differences. So film and game development both require immense creativity and collaboration, but their processes diverge due to the fundamental difference between linear storytelling and interactive experiences. So while film focuses on delivering a controlled narrative and emotional journey, games prioritize player agency, immersion, and systems that respond dynamically to player input.
With film, you have linear storytelling with a fixed duration with a single repeatable experience designed to convey a fixed story. The focus is on delivering a crafted emotional or visual experience. Games, however, it's a non-linear experience, often lasting dozens or even hundreds of hours. Developers must design systems, rules, gameplay mechanics to engage players. They are designed for replayability with many branching storylines, multiple endings, and gameplay variations.
Another big difference in game development is the pipeline, especially the fact that we iterate a lot. Iteration is constant throughout the entire development cycle. We're constantly refining based on our own feedback, our team's feedback, and through user testing. So this process continues right up to the moment we ship the game. Even after release, we're still iterating as we test live with millions of players. hopefully. A key part of the process is accepting we may have to discard a significant portion of our work, knowing that it's all part of shaping the best possible experience.
The approach to creating games is fundamentally different from working in film because the audience interaction with the medium is dynamic and immersive. In film, the creator controls every aspect of the viewer's experience. The framing, pacing, the sequence of events are premeditated, allowing filmmakers to selectively reveal or conceal elements to guide the audience's emotions and perceptions. In contrast, game places the audience or the players at the center of the experience. So the players actively engage with the environment, exploring it at their own pace from every possible angle. This interactivity eliminates the ability to hide details in the same way that film can. For example, in a game, a meticulously designed environment must hold up to the scrutiny from multiple perspectives, as players can examine objects, roam freely, and even manipulate certain elements. Every piece of the world, from the textures to the story elements, must be thoughtfully designed to create a cohesive experience that holds up under close scrutinization.
So yeah, project length and pace. The film industry is much faster paced with shorter project timelines and typically briefer contracts. In contrast, game development requires significantly more time to bring a project to fruition, which can be an advantage and a challenge. If you thrive in environments with quick turnarounds and enjoy going from one project to the next, transitioning into games might require some adjustment. A long game development cycle, sometimes 4 to 8 years, sometimes more, for AAA titles demands sustained focus and motivation. However, the benefits of this extended timeline are clear. You gain much greater job stability from deeper relationships with colleagues and teams, and develop a stronger emotional attachment to the project. The extended nature of the work means a more collaborative long-term sense of achievement as you can see a game evolve and ultimately come to life.
So where do our two industries converge and what are the similarities? For years, films and games have shared a close connection, with games adaptations of films and vice versa. This trend shows no sign of slowing down, with a wave of new exciting projects on the horizon, like Sonic 3, a Minecraft movie, Super Mario Bros. 2, Last of Us 2, and many more. Major entertainment companies recognize the growing potential of this convergence. So Netflix, Amazon, and Apple now have their own game studios, and it will be fascinating to see what innovative projects emerge from them.
An Unreal Engine is another area which both industries are now using. So the virtual production techniques are now used by filmmakers to blend physical and digital elements in real time. For previews, directors and cinematographers can plan scenes in a fully rendered environment, experimenting with camera angles, lighting, and set designs before physically filming. With virtual sets, which you see, actually, can you click? And it'll, like, so the virtual sets is basically a big LED wall displaying real-time rendered environments in Unreal. This allows actors to perform in front of dynamic, photorealistic backdrops without green screens. This enhances realism and reduces post-production work. The other advantage with real-time sets is that teams can make instant changes to the set, lighting, or effects on the fly. Some high-profile projects which have used Unreal Engine in innovative ways are The Mandalorian, which you can see here, which was used for its virtual sets, Westworld, which used Unreal's rendering capabilities for its digital environments, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 for real-time rendering of complex visual effects.
There are a lot of similarities in technique and software between our two industries. Core artistic principles like composition, lighting, color theory, framing, perspective, and pacing are essential in both industries. For UI, we are heavily influenced by film titles and fictional UI within film as well. We often look towards studios such as Territory, and their film work is usually in our mood boards. If you didn't know, Territory actually provide the UI art direction for games as well. And Hayley has been fortunate to work in the same project as them. For software, both industries have a lot of crossover, including Maya, Blender, Motion Builder, Houdini, and Substance, just to name a few.
I've been on the Territory website today looking at reference. True story. So the idea of video games being simplistic and not receptive to high-end skills is no longer the barrier it once was for many skilled VFX artists. You can now fully utilize your talents on ambitious interactive projects without compromising. You only have to look at some of the current games out there to see how close film and games are becoming. Game engines are improving massively with every release, with Unreal Engine tools such as Nanite, we're getting to the point where poly counts don't matter anymore. And with lighting tools such as Lumen and Megalights, it's making it easier to create realistic real-time lighting.
So we hope this has provided you with valuable insight into the games industry. The key takeaway is to remain open-minded and flexible. Considering games as a potential opportunity for your career could lead to exciting new paths. Whether you are bringing skills from another field or exploring a new discipline, the games industry offers plenty of room for growth and creativity.
Yep, so thank you everyone, and a big thank you to VES for inviting us.
Thank you. Hope it was useful.
If you have any questions, catch us later.
Thank you, Helen or Helly. I don't know which, but anyway, thank you very much. I don't know how he's going to do it now, but our next guest is our man behind the scenes. It's Hugo. Yes, Hugo Guerra, who's director and VFX supervisor. He's going to be talking about cinematics, I believe. Hugo first came to prominence as head of the nuke department and VFX super at the Mill, with clients like Audi, Adidas, Nike, IKEA, Activision, and Ubisoft. He's universally known in the VFX industry for Hugo's Desk on YouTube and co-host of the VFX Notes podcast with Ian Fales from Before and Afters. He's also worked at Fire Without Smoke, directing game cinematics for CCP, Ubisoft, Deep Silver, Square Enix, and Warhammer, as well as being the VFX suit for Sony PlayStation and a film director for Rebellion Studios and Zeiss. Hopefully he's going to be able to do two things at once and be in two places at once. Here's Hugo Guerra. A round of applause.
Yeah, just good. Well, thanks for showing the whole presentation, huh? Yeah, can you? Okay, I see. We're on the last slide. That's great. Can you just go to the first one, please? I know. It's like, okay, well, we can go now. What does it do? Wait, no, stop. A lot, but I'm going to be really quick. I'm going to be super quick. You're going to see. I'm going to be super quick. You guys are going to never going to understand what I've said. Yeah, please don't look. Okay, here you go, please. Yes, great. Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you again. First of all, thank you. Sorry for this little inconvenience. It's always a bit of a garbage truck on fire whenever I'm involved. So apologies for that. And of course, I would like to thank the Visual Effects Society for inviting me, and of course, the Visual Effects Society for the London chapter for inviting me, and for everyone that made this event possible, for all these amazing guests. It's been really great to be all with you, and of course, with everyone over there as well. Hello, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to be really quick. My name is Hugo Guerra. I'm a director and visual effects supervisor. I brought a show reel because I was told that I only had 10 minutes, so I brought a 29-second show reel. So we're going to watch it. Okay, any questions? It's done now. I don't have anything else to say. Okay, so, well, joking around. This is going to be a bit of a different presentation. My idea would be to show you my journey of how I ended up working in games. Well, first in visual effects, and then games, and then visual effects again. And so instead of being a more technical talk, I just wanted to give you a bit of insight of the journey and why we went through those rabbit holes of gaming. So, of course, it's with some time skips, omissions, and some NDAs as well, because there's certain things I can't talk about. The whole thing starts here. I was born in Portugal, more precisely in Porto, just like my dear friend here, Ricardo. There's at least two people from Porto here, which is great. So I've worked on a lot of different companies, both visual effects and game related. So more famously, of course, by the Mill, I was the head of the new compositing over there. Also Fire.Smoke, I was a cinematic director there for a while. At Rebellion as well, and at London Studio Sony as well. And of course, Nexus as well here in London. And I've worked with a lot of different clients and a lot of different games over the years. And that kind of all started really for me on set. I've always been on set a lot of times, and I've always tried to be doing some kind of filmmaking thing And so I've always was a lot of on set. That's my background. It's 2D really. And so I was always doing these kind of things, like putting weird spheres and holding checkered boards in weird places. These are some of the cinematics that I've worked on. I've done, some of these are trailers that I've done. Some of them have been cinematics. Some of them have been in-game cinematics. Others have been like just marketing trailers for the project. The last one I did was for Sniper Elite 5, which I directed the cinematic to introduce the game. That was the last. But how did this all begun, really? This is me, by the way, when I had a lot more hair. And so it kind of started when my father asked me if I wanted to have a bicycle or a Spectrum Sinclair. You probably already know what I did. I picked the Sinclair. And of course, that's why I'm a bit chubby, of course, because I still, to this day, I can't ride the bicycle yet. And of course, this was what photoreal graphics looked like at the time. I thought this was real. I mean, at least at the time, it looked great. But it still is, exactly. So fast forward, you know, I also had a huge passion for cinema, so I was quite obsessed with Eisenstein. I was quite obsessed with, well, Eisenstein. I'm quite obsessed with Kubrick. I'm still obsessed with Kubrick. And then the three Davids. I am obsessed with David Cronenberg, David Lynch, and David Fincher. And so then with all of this, I loved cinema, loved games. I went to art school. And because, you know, back in the 90s, that's what people used to do. They used to go to art school. And I did that. I went there. I did my master's degree in art. And then from there, while I was there, by doing video art, I learned After Effects 3.1. That was kind of like the starting point, starting to go into the visual effects world. I still have quite a lot of those softwares. I actually have the After Effects 3.1 box still, and the After Effects 5, which was the first ones I used at the time. Now, back there in Portugal, when I finally finished my art degree, I actually ended up doing a lot of video art, a lot of films, and I ended up doing this piece of crap. This is like my first project. I was 19, and it's a really terrible movie. This is like the Ninja dos Caldas, which is the ninja of the place where I was studying. And this is a really, really crappy movie, all shot on video weight. The whole thing is edited video to video. It's a monumental piece of crap, but it was the first thing I did. You know, I was 18, I was 19, 18 while I was doing it. It took me a year. We were quite lucky. It actually ended up being broadcast in TV, so it became a bit of a viral thing in Portugal. It was broadcasted in TV, although it looks like this, but it was quite nice. And so I even went to TV to talk about it. Look at it, that's me. When I was young, I even went and did that as well on a show that Ricardo probably know, Cabra da Coxa, which is the show that I don't think it exists anymore. Oh, it still exists. Okay. Well, it's been running for 20 years then. That's fine. This was 23 years ago, by the way. So fast forward, then I did of course, I did a lot of, 5 minutes. Did a lot of work. You know, I'm going to go faster then. Then went to Sweden, then worked in Sweden, then learned Shake, then learned Combustion, then learned Final Cut, then learned Nuke. Went through there, you know, learned Nuke as well, then did more crap commercials and more crap stuff. Then, of course, continued teaching to people and teaching on set and teaching at schools as well. Always really enjoyed teaching. Finally moved to Britain. This was 17 years ago. Worked at Nexus for a while. Very talented people at Nexus. I love working there, and they do some amazing work as well. I'm going to just scroll through. Eventually, I ended up going to the Mill. The Mill was when I finally for the first time, started working in games, which was my dream from the beginning when I was 6 years old, when you saw that photo. There I did my first cinematic, which was for Body Count. Terrible game, don't play it. But you know, it was really nice to work on this game. I was the lead composer of this project. I was the only composer of the project, so I was leading myself. But it was quite interesting because this was the first time I ended up like having assets from a game, and we had to use the assets and then kind of build the assets and convert them to mental ray, and we had all this thing of getting packages from the game studio. It kind of like started the whole thing inside the Mill, and also for me as well. Fast forward, of course, I continued working at the Mill. At the later stage at the Mill, when I was already a cinematic visual effects supervisor, I then worked on, for a huge team at the Mill, we worked on Call of Duty Ghost cinematics. These were the in-game cinematics of the project. And again, it was the kind of same process. We were bringing in the assets from the game and then converting them, and then kind of like applying some of our pipeline of visual effects to do cinematic feeling movies, either marketing pieces or, in this case, these were story plot driven videos. I then left the mill because I couldn't stand doing this every day. I also couldn't really stand having clients next to me the whole time because I had a suite at the mill. And going back to one of the differences that you were talking about the games industry is that sometimes we don't have a client right next to it. It's a bit different. So I started working from home. This is my office and my house where I work these days. And then I started working for Fire.Smoke. I was the cinematic director for Fire.Smoke. Fire.Smoke is an agency here in London that does a lot of game trailers and a lot of cinematics. And with that, I then ended up doing Just Cause 3, which we did a lot of cinematics and trailers for it. I'm going to go because Saint is giving you the evil eye. So, and then I ended up also doing Homefront: The Revolution, which was the first time we actually had an in-house, an in-game cinematic. So these were the cinematics that were playing when you booted up the game for the first time. And I had this idea of making it in live action. So at the time we did it in live action. This was like 2017, I think, or something like that. So we did it with motion control. We did it with the assets of the game as well. I'm gonna go faster as well. Ended up doing some cinematics for Heroes Arena as well, which was a much more completely normal visual effects pipeline where we had the assets from the games, but we convert them to Redshift, and we actually convert them to Dini and Maya, ended up using a regular visual effects pipeline to output the cinematics, but with the game studio involved because we were sharing assets backwards and forwards. From there, we ended up doing some cinematics for the crew, Calling All Cars. Unfortunately, the game has been delisted, so it's not possible to play this game anymore. Some stuff for The Walking Dead as well, and then eventually I wanted to focus a little bit on this one because this one was a turning point for Fire.Smoke. We ended up working on this trailer for Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle, and this was the first time we actually started using the engine itself. This was something started at Fire.Smoke where for the first time we got the builds of the game much earlier than everyone else. We would get the games months before the game was even done. Sometimes the builds would be even incomplete. Sections of the game would be grayscale. But we started getting the engines into the studio. So I packed my things, went to Paris, to Ubisoft, got my creme brulee and got into Ubisoft. I stayed there for like a couple of months working with the team, and we then did cinematic trailers for Mario Rabbids. And this was the first time we started using an engine. This was Snowdrop at the time. And we started this was much earlier than Unreal. It was like before everyone loves Unreal now. This was like much, much earlier. And when we started looking at this engine, we started developing methodologies of doing alpha channels and doing AOVs as well. So we could not only render out the CG into a regular visual effects pipeline, but also kind of render it out of the engine with passes in AOVs. So this is the engine of the Mario game, and then these are some of the passes we got, and this is, these are some of the AOVs. The funny thing with this is that at the time when I was at their office, I said, okay, so let's render it in EXR. And they've made a pipeline for us to get the EXR AOVs so we can go to compositing and actually do the shots and then make the trailers. And then they were so apologetic because they turned to me and said, oh, but we're going to render to EXR, but unfortunately, we can only render at 10 frames per second. So I'm so sorry we can't render it at 60. And I was like, that's fine. 10 frames per second is more than enough. And we ended up doing the cinematic. Now, unfortunately, we did a lot of shots for it. The cinematic kind of went backwards and forwards. Ubisoft ended up doing different shots. We didn't, oh, sorry, I'm now going forward too much. Oh, I can't go back. Okay, that's good. That's good that I can't go back. So never mind that. That's good that I can't go back. This is Vermintide. This is one of the last projects I did also with live action. Again, for Warhammer, where we again implemented a lot of the typical visual effects industry of shooting on set, of having miniatures, of having compositing and CG and matte paintings into something that would be inside a game, either as an in-game cinematic or as a marketing piece to introduce the game to the world. In this case, this was the reveal trailer for this game, for Vermintide 2. And I guess I'm going to just we don't need to see these breakdowns, you guys can see it. this was very peculiar as well. So for about a year, this is something I really wanted to address, which is if you decide to go to the games industry, a lot of your projects won't really see the light of day. This happened to me 7 times already, and this was the last time that it happened to me already. I worked for 2 years on this VR project for an undisclosed company and an undisclosed studio, which I will never be able to see. Maybe I'll say it on my deathbed. And this project was 2 years of my life, and it was canceled because of COVID. So get ready for that. Unfortunately, that happens. But, you know, I was still paid. You know, I still got a salary. That's fine. And then I think the last project I just did was Rebellion, did Sniper Elite 5's trailer. This was, again, the same kind of deal, getting a lot of, all of these were assets from the game. We then ended up applying a completely typical visual effects pipeline where we used their mocap system to actually capture all the animation we needed for the trailers and cinematics we were doing. And then the rest was just typical compositing, rendering in Redshift and compositing in Nuke. I'm going to just go for it because I'm out of time, right? Yeah, indeed. Okay, so follow my Hugo's Desk YouTube channel. Of course, I have the podcast with Ian Fell's VFX Notes podcast. So what have I learned since '99? Well, I just learned that I actually don't know anything, and I'm constantly learning and adapting. And if anything has taught me over these years is that it doesn't really matter what you're doing as long as you have this set of skill sets that you can transfer from project to project and company to company. It doesn't really matter if I was doing video art or if I was doing games or if I was doing a CG trailer, or if I was doing a commercial or a short film. All of the knowledge I know from composition and lighting and photography can be transferred because softwares are just softwares. And you just need to be as agnostic as possible and use any of them. And I hope that was something. It's 10 minutes, so that's fine. Yes. There you go.
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks, folks. And yeah, that's Hugo, the Jack Reacher of VFX. Never go back. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so now we're going to enter into the online component now. We've got Stephen Archibald, who's a VFX artist from Coconut Lizard, and he's going to be talking about leaping across from studying VFX to games QA and VFX in AAA games. Stephen's journey started with studying an MA in computer animation and VFX at the renowned Teesside University, but he took those acquired skills into games. Previously, he'd worked as a QA tester for Sony Computer Entertainment Europe and Ubisoft Reflections and indie developer CodeSync. He now works as a VFX artist for Coconut Lizard, a games company who specialise in optimising games and platform development. Stephen, are you there?
Hi guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. We hear you.
Thank you. Good. Right, I'll make sure I can get this screen shared. Let's have a look. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, great. I'll get started then. So I'm Stephen Archibald, and I'll just quickly talk you through my time and experience working in the game industry. Goes back a little ways, but I'll try and be quick with it. So yeah, as already said, I'm a VFX artist in the games industry, currently based in the northeast of England. I have a master's in computer animation VFX from Teesside University. I've been working in the games industry for about 12 years now, and 10 of those years I've been spent working in QA, and some of those games on the right are some of the games I've worked on during that time. But more recently, I transitioned to visual effects in 2022 at D3T and Coconut Lizard. I'll give you a quick introduction to D3T and Coconut Lizard and who they are as a company. So they are an award-winning studio. They currently have 2 offices, one based in Daresbury, which is near Liverpool, and their sister studio, Coconut Lizard, which is where I'm based, up in the northeast near Newcastle. They've won the Best Place to Work award many times over the years, and I myself really enjoy my time working there. They operate as a co-development studio, so that essentially means as games have got bigger, more detailed than ever, it's hard for one studio to make a AAA game anymore. So they bring a team of experts like us at D3T and Coconut Lizard to help bring the project through to completion. So that means that we could be working on anything from features to DLC packs, even advice on best practices. So essentially anything the client needs to support the development process. On top of that, they are owned by Keywords, who are a technical and creative solutions provider to the global game industry, and they've worked with many, many different studios over their lifetime. So for us at D3T, there's always potential for us to be working with some like absolutely awesome studios. But how did I get started? So from a young age, I always had like an interest in kind of like animation, and I wanted to pursue it as a career. So I looked at the go to do this, and I studied animation design at the University of Sunderland. It was primarily a traditional animation course. It wasn't games related at all. But after graduation, it did actually help me get my like first role in the industry. Because there was a lack of traditional animation jobs at the time. Like I should have been aware of this given the rise of 3D. But I felt entering the industry and leveling up some of the skill gaps I would have would be the best idea to get like my career started. So I feel like even if you have like a path that's not games related, like the industry always seems to be open to those who have like a passion, whether it's art or animation, even programming. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the game sector. So following graduation, I ended up working at Sony and Ubisoft in the QA department. And during that time, I had the opportunity to kind of learn like the ins and outs of like AAA game development, documentation, and Jira being kind of the bugging software that a lot of game companies use. Working towards deadlines, development workflows, the code dev setup, which means like communicating and working with the internal team, but the large teams kind of outside of your own kind of studio. And working with game engines as well. So none of this at the time was strictly related to VFX, but it was all helping me understand how game development works. I think if anyone has similar experience working in development, even if it's outside of games, it's all probably still going to be relevant to games in like some particular way. So after doing that for about 5 years or so, I wanted to expand my skill set. So I joined the computer animation and visual effects course at Teesside University with the intent of revisiting animation. It was a very broad course, but it helped me like gain an understand of like 3D asset creation, so like creating environments and characters through Maya, Max, or Blender, 3D animation, like understanding like rigging, timing, and like weight with using the similar software. Effects animation, kind of like particle simulations and using rigid body simulation and making rigid body simulations through something like Houdini. And like the process of research and development, so like the process of look depth, gathering resources, understanding the overall look of what something may be, and material and texture creation, so like the surface look of objects and environments, we're using things like Photoshop, maybe Substance Paint or Substance Designer. But on top of that, I was also like developing some other skills at the same time, like increasing my like creativity and coming up with ideas and approaches to tackling assignments, improving my communication skills and developing them from what I'd learned at my time in QA. My technical problem solving skills, understanding why a piece of software may not be given the result I intended and working how to solve that issue. And like adaptability and learning how to take previous knowledge and apply to some like new software technology or the ability to take on like new software. So at this point, it really did open my eyes to more than just animation. And I was really starting to look at like VFX as a future career option. So, but I still had an interest in games, and I thought about how I could take my uni work and reapply it to video games. And at the time, I saw the increase of game engines and film production pipelines, and the use of game engines did relate to my history working in games, and it seemed like the obvious approach for the next step in my studies, but also kind of like keeping it relevant to the course. So opting to like work in a game engine, I looked at how I could use what I've learned on the film side of the course and reapply it to a new workflow, and it should, but also at the same time, because when you're working in something like Unreal, they're always fighting with a frame rate, ensure that everything I was doing was running optimally. So when using Unreal, because of that optimum, I mean, making things run optimally, it needed a slightly different approach to how I'd been doing things previously. But it did like allow me to discover techniques such as like using texture sheets, which is like taking Houdini simulations or creating textures mainly or creating textures through like maybe something else like Photoshop or Substance Designer, but packing them into a single image. So you have like a full sequence of animation on one single like texture image. The use of texture packing, so using the RGB channels of an image to contain different textures. So for an explosion, this could be like you could have the smoke on the red channel, you could have the emissives on the blue channel. You would still have space for an additional texture on the green channel if you needed it, and the alpha channel would be open to your alpha materials. And also like taking those textures and taking them into Unreal and creating materials out of them so they could work better with Unreal. But it also would allow for like further customization where you could like play around with the emissives, play around with the color of the image, and maybe add something like UV distortion. And finally, once all that's together, it's kind of like grabbing all this information and packing it together in like the particle tool simulation of Unreal. It was Cascade at the time. They've now moved on to Niagara, but it's pulling all those animation principles back into something and coming up with a finished like visual effect, essentially. So everything on the film side was still being used. The method was the same, but like the approach was just a little bit different at this point. But like even after like going through all this time at like doing a master's course and like picking up all these new skills, I still had a lot to learn. So after graduation, I found myself back in QA at a company called CodeSync, who are like based in the northeast of England as well. And so with this increased vocabulary I had and the knowledge I gained through my time at university, it did actually greatly help with my communication with CodeSync. I felt it had broken down some barriers and like some communication barriers I'd previously had. So for instance, like the bugs of documentation could be more accurate and precise and help me better identify and understand and articulate issues when they occurred. And I feel if anybody's any experience in any of these software tools I've just mentioned, whether someone from university or working in film, they're only going to be huge benefits side on the game side as well. It's just kind of like repurposing that information or that knowledge you have and making it fit into a game landscape. But while I was doing all this QA CodeSync, I was still working on my VFX in my spare time. And after a couple show reels, it eventually led me to D3T, which is where I'm working now and have been working since 2022. So I was hired as a junior visual effects artist at D3T. I'm one of 2 visual effects artists in the entire company, and I was unaware of like how great the shortage of visual effects artists are in games. And my role as a visual effects artist at D3T is to essentially make any slew of effects from character effects, which could be spell or blood attacks, weapon effects, muzzle flashes, explosions of bullets, environmental effects, rain, wind, dust, destruction, or fire, something of that nature. There's many, many more to this, but I'd be here absolutely all day if I were to go through the full list of the things I've been working on. So how do I use my VFX skills in my day-to-day job? So thanks to my experience in QA, I was already familiar with the development cycle, and during my time at university, I felt comfortable with the tools I was using. But the first project I was assigned to, the company used their own game engine, and this is uncommon with companies within games. Companies can often use their own game engines outside of something like Unreal or Unity, which are the more common ones. But it's always going to be something to kind of like adapt to and kind of like to learn and understand. And even if you don't have that information like directly in front of you at the time, there's always people to kind of communicate and help you kind of like get grips of it and start to understand it. Yeah, but like I'd learned at university, adapting to new technology was all part of the process. And when confronted with issues, yeah, it was all just a case of kind of like talking and communicating, collaborating with the wider team. And like at university, when I decided to work on Unreal, I just applied the same mentality of when I moved over to Unreal at university and took my existing knowledge and just reapplied it. So I was still using Houdini and Imagen to create texture sheets based on simulations. I was still using Substance Designer, but it was used to create noise masks or maybe muzzle flashes. Maya and Blender were still playing a huge part in mesh creation or maybe even like UV manipulation. Looking at Photoshop, for texture creation, texture packing, and any value adjustments. And like while the particle tool was different in this bespoke engine, all the rules of the timing and the spawn rate that applied on Unreal still applied here again. Oops, sorry, I've jumped ahead. Yeah, I'll catch up. So yeah, and while the engine was different and unique, I was still using everything I'd learned. Nothing there really changed. All the principles and methods were still relevant. Like every step of the way, I was constantly exercising my kind of creativity, my problem solving, and constantly communicating, collaborating with the wider teams. Yeah, so nothing at university, so everything I'd learned at university was just constantly playing a part in the process. I'll do a quick breakdown of like the day-to-day and what that kind of looks like from being like assigned a task to bringing it through to completion. So like from working in QA, I'd already seen this kind of process before, but so it felt kind of natural when applying to my visual effects work. But from like starting effect, it essentially starts with being assigned a task. And from my experience, they often assign based on the individual's strength, but there's also the option to take advantage of maybe a skill gap you might have or something maybe you're not comfortable with. You want to take something on for the benefit of like learning something from it. That I've always had that option from working with D3T and Coconut Lizard. When we then go through a process of scoping out the task, which often means talking to designers to work out the intent of what the feature is and based on the VFX needs around that. Once that's been like put together, we can now start like a blocking pass, which is essentially like the storyboard or the level block out, where we use very simple textures, but we're trying to nail down the weight and the timing based on all the information we've gathered from the scoping task. And next is like creation and communication. This is where textures and materials are essentially made within Unreal or whichever engine you're using, and the look of the effect starts to come together. There's often a communication with like departments to see if it's meeting the style of the game, like referring back to the design documents, getting technical support for more advanced side of the effects. And once that's been put together, we then work towards the implementation of the effect, like getting it put into the feature or having it assigned to a character, which again is just further talk with other departments. Like this could be an engineering hookup for the effect, or maybe we need to speak to our animation to get the timing right. Maybe it's timing a visual effect to a character. And then it is a cycle of feedback and iteration, and that kind of like goes back and forth until you get it. The effect is essentially completed. But again, as game development is, like you're constantly going through a process where the game might change. Some things might get pulled back, some things might get advanced on. So the effect itself is only going to really be completed until the game itself is like pretty much done and at the door. So why game VFX, and why have I kind of like find myself here, and why do I love it so much, and why do I stay here? So within like VFX, which I really like, there's a broad range of skills within the VFX role within games, I feel. I believe there's a mixture of more creatively minded artists who are better with like maybe like textures or maybe the timing side of things, of the animation. There's also a side for people who are like much more technically kind of adept, who understand the guts of particle systems or maybe the guts of the material editor. Maybe they've got like a programming background to like benefit that. But we both work in tandem and we're also like working together. I love the collaboration side of games. It's just great to work with people who always try to work on the best game possible. Across the industry as well, like there's a huge range of art styles. The industry isn't just limited to exclusively realistic games, and even at the company I work at, like we work on a wide range of like styles within our projects. And the technology is always changing, and because of that, like there's a huge range of art tools to like just use every day. And I feel that ultimately leads to like just every day feeling constantly creative. One day I could be making textures, the other day I could be in the particle editor, another day I could be using like blueprints, which is the kind of the visual programming side of Unreal. So yeah, it's just a constant flow of just like creative involvement with yourself and the wider team in the industry. On the business side as well, there's a lot of benefits. Like for us at like D3T at least, like all the VFX roles in games are full time now. I think that's similar across the industry. There's a huge like skill gap for VFX artists within games as well. So there's plenty of opportunity to enter the industry if you want to be a VFX artist. Holiday and sick pay pensions are all kind of catered for and looked after. There's a huge range of projects to be kind of getting involved with, and they're all pretty diverse from one another. And I know like crunch culture used to be kind of a very negative thing in the industry, but it's definitely just become a thing of the past, and I just haven't encountered it for the longest time now. And yeah, I think it's ultimately just something that people just don't need to worry about anymore. That pretty much concludes my talk. If you want to like contact me, my email address is on screen now, my LinkedIn as well. But if you want to find more information about D3T, have a look at some of their work on ArtStation, here's some links. But that's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the depth and breadth of your show there. That was amazing. So thank you very much. I hope you're going to hang around for the Q&As if you can. We're now on to our ultimate speaker, Johannes Richter, who's going to talk about VFX games and the entertainment engineering. And Johannes is technical art director at Guerilla in Amsterdam, and before that was head of VFX at Remedy, working on Alan Wake 2. But his pedigree goes further back to VFX work at Framestore, things such as films such as Gravity and The Mill. So who better to talk about switching lanes to the games industry and skill sets and experiences and what life is like at 60 frames per second. So Johannes, over to you.
Thank you so much. Let me share the experience. Can you all hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the VES to have invited me. Thank you for Hugo to reach out. We used to be colleagues at the Mill. And I had to smile a few times when I realized how much overlap we actually had in our past. I'm going to talk about entertainment engineering in VFX for film and games. And start with a quick introduction. So Johannes Richter, that's my name. I'm a technical art director at Guerilla Games. I live now in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And the premise of this talk,
We can't see your,
this whole...
we can't see your...
Okay, then let's wait for a moment. I'm sharing my screen, so you should be seeing it.
You need to press the not yet. Hold on. Yeah. I think it's our end. Ah, yes.
So you can try again.
Got it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wonderful, thanks. All right, cool. Well, the premise of what I'm going to talk about today, or what the whole night is about, and there's been some wonderful overlaps in the prior talks, is VFX of film on one side and games on the other side, and they're like two cliffs, and then we have someone standing there going, oh, how am I going to get across this unbridgeable abyss of like danger and peril? Really, I don't think that's the case. Sometimes it's maybe being made out as that, and all night we've been talking about how that is not the case. Yes, it's not that simple. And of course, everyone has their own journey. I can talk about my own journey. And but I want to look at sort of the ingredients and not the meal. I want to talk about the things that I've actually been doing as part of my job, not the projects I've been working on, because often you go like, oh, I work on this film and in this game, and it seems like it's so far apart. But if you look at what you're actually doing, you're like, oh, well, it's actually very similar. Kind of giving it away a little. So I want to highlight the commonalities I experienced in my own journey as a technical VFX artist through my career. And for my own journey, we kind of need to travel back in time, and I had to laugh out loud when Hugo did the same thing. The 90s, these were my heroes, and that's what I was playing, and I was really mad at all those guys, and I was sort of finding my creative outlet there, or my sort of inspiration, and sort of the worlds I was dreaming up in, with like McCracken and Guybrush and Bernard and those people. And I watched those type of movies. I was totally into like sci-fi, and it was a Trekkie and all that type of stuff that, I don't know, some, teen in the 90s was. I had my forever love, but this is my computer that I had, or I convinced my parents to get myself, an Amiga 500, 6.25 megahertz, like doing everything they can to, make you immersed in their worlds. And that's where I started playing together with my brother, because we kind of had to share, until I got bored of playing and I started making my own games. Like, I don't know, das Klospiel, like, I need to find the toilet in a certain amount of time in a maze or something. And I was trying to aspire to my heroes. I tried to make point-and-click adventures, and I think I saw Casper at the movies, and I go like, oh, they did a ghost because it doesn't have feet, so you don't have to do the feet on the ground, and the animations are like, yeah, I need to do a ghost in my game too, and in my game, so I don't have to do the animation because I didn't know how to do that. And that's as far as I got, because most of my games, sadly, were kind of unfinished. It was a very experimental time, but it was still sort of forming in many ways what actually then later on became more than just a passion. And there were dozens of those games, and it's sometimes really funny to dive through old hard drives and find that type of stuff. The tools I used, though, were quite interesting back then. Even Deluxe Paint, I don't know if anyone remembers that, but you could do pixel animation and pixel graphics, and that was pretty epic to sort of just being able to do those type of things. And I was programming in Amiga Basic at the start, later on some kind of compiled version of it, to do a bit more speedy things. Later on, I used Turbo Pascal and like inline assembler instructions to draw pixels on a 320 by 200 screen. And I even did some 3D. Don't ask me where I got that from. Reflections too on an Amiga. It's like my first 3D modeling software and a 3D renderer, two different applications that you could run. And I made this type of 3D art, sort of, trying. But that was my first touching points with all those things. And now you go like, oh, great, cool. Now I know about sort of the hobbies of someone in the 90s and what's with all the nostalgia. Well, I think there's something we all have in common, really, as we have seen. And so now we have a sample of two. I thought it's a sample of one, a sample of two, that we all have something in common that is a passion for the digital arts. And that sounds like really big. really, it's for me the passion for pixels and maybe doing complicated stuff with like software and code. That's sort of what I was into. And I was into that way before I started working in this as a profession. And I like to refer to that as entertainment engineering. And we'll get back to that in a bit. So let's fast forward. I did work in film for like 10, 12 years in London and Sydney. There's different companies, so Animal Logic. I was at the Mill, at Hugo, I was at Frame Store, where I spent most of my time with the wonderful people there. And what I now want to talk about is, as I said before, not the films I actually worked on, but what I actually did when I was working on those films. Because that's, well, the real deal. That's what you do when you show up at the office and have to click buttons, right? So I was part of destroying the Hubble telescope and the ISS for gravity. It's a wonderful team. And what it really meant doing that was actually creating a lot of like rigs in Maya, right? So we had a very complicated system that would allow us to do like bendy metal deformation based on some rigid body simulation. And this system is actually written in Mel and in Python. So there was a lot of like Mel and Python to sort of maintain the system, run the system, do stuff with it. Then it was a lot about like animating stuff, sometimes keyframing sort of objects hitting things inside Maya to iterate on simulations for the actual shots that would then run through the pipeline and in the end be rendered into those beautiful renders that the film then eventually contained. And then I was part of simulating 3.172 million bats at least for Dracula Untold. And what that really meant was like, well, how do you make that many bats? So there was a lot of thinking that how to build what we then called the bat machine, which was a system that could do animation instancing and sort of pre-made animation curves. Like, so there were just curves where, or trajectories where bats would be flying, and we did some animation or motion matching of animation clips against those to have them animate as if they would be flying where we knew they would be flying already, that type of thing. And that was done in Houdini, lots of Python code and also VEX. Then sort of writing some kind of pipeline around this so you could actually get it into every shot, like to actually sort of be able to say, run the bets for this one, and then it would sort of do the process to create all those animations, or not the animations, but the sort of the curves that would have then those clips baked on them. And then there were many shots with bats. And that was all about particle simulations or animating something by hand or sort of doing Boyd simulations. And that was in Maya, there was in Houdini, there was sort of all sorts of sources that could get us those curves of bats flying that we then translated into the actual bats flying. And then the last example I have is like blowing up all of space in Geostorm. Who hasn't worked on it when you were in London at that time? And Framestore is known for like space stuff. So we did space stuff. And that started with making a lot of explosion elements. So we had like sort of pre-made explosion libraries of like things, you know, blowing up and lots of debris clouds and shrapnel and things. And I spent a lot of time in Maya actually writing a PyQt application. Like a little dope sheet editor where you could then place those explosions on the timeline, and in space you had a little preview sort of point cloud that represented that, so you could in real time see the timings and the motion of what would then be actually visible once you actually render it. And that was kind of pretty much software development with the UI and sort of testing with people, but also testing on myself because I was using those tools to make the shots. And that was a pretty awesome experience. There was a lot to do that, or somehow, well, it just happened to happen that we were doing that, and it helped us greatly further down the line in other projects too. But we also had to do a lot of shots. So because there was everything exploding, we had to use that system straight away in the context of the film to create all the shots. And there were many more, and it was always an exciting time with similar types of work that had to be done, always a bit on the development side, somehow making something that allows us to make the thing that then is in the film. So that is entertainment engineering, right? So solving artistic, creative issues with cool tech so people can have fun watching movies. Undoubtedly, the best job in the world. Oh, wait. Now the move. So it was 2019, and that is when sort of I decided I would want to leave really kind of just London at first, for many reasons, many like sort of private, like maybe living somewhere else after a while, but maybe also a perspective of like healthcare and education and maybe having a family and all those type of things. And while looking at what's out there in terms of perspectives, it happened that Facebook was actually trumping LinkedIn because my old flatmate had a friend who was sort of a freelance recruiter for some company in Finland that were looking for VFX artists, apparently rare. And somehow I was like, oh, you do something with VFX, don't you guys want to talk? And then I ended up in a series of interviews with Remedy Entertainment in Helsinki, and that's where I then started working. So we moved to Finland in spring 2019, and I got to work on 3 different projects with them: to Control Foundation, which is a DLC, and then most of my time there spent actually on Alan Wake 2. And it sounded really scary at first, but also, of course, talking to the people there, like what is it that I would be doing, and also sort of preparing myself and them for like, what if it is something I can't do? And really, it all turned out that it was most things that were familiar, and if they were unfamiliar, that is almost stuff that I couldn't have learned because it was in-house technology. So I had lots of new colleagues. There was a proprietary engine, so not Unreal, not Unity, just something else. Northlight, it's called, and of course, it was a new country. With lots of Finnish people. But there was also lots that was familiar because it was still pixels, and pixels are pixels, and there's normal maps, and there's sort of particles, and there's meshes and triangles and all that type of stuff you're fully familiar with. There's a 3D world to fill. The math is the same. The buttons are somewhere else. And it was still creative problem seeking for a technical match of some kind. And that actually turned out to be, for me, quite a fluent transition. That it didn't ever feel overwhelming. Not that it was easy and that I didn't have to learn a lot of things, but somehow it didn't feel like sort of an unbridgeable gap, as mentioned before. So I was involved in Control at some real-time destruction. Real-time destruction really, in this case, meant procedural modeling, material-based collision hierarchies, and Houdini. So we had sort of pre-made game models that we would then bring into Houdini and break into parts and with different sort of pieces of shrapnel that would then, through the game engine, be activated depending on the player sort of action. If you shoot a hole into something, it would crumble. There's a whole GDC talk that I did, Control Lessons in Procedural Destruction. If you want to know more about this particular thing, then please check that one out. But it was Houdini set up and lots of assets to be created, and then tested an engine, polished up so that they really look great, and also fulfill sort of the engine requirements of like being fairly low res. And also learning a bit about like how to make something look as good as it could be in film, although you don't actually have any bandwidth to do that, because you got to run this at least at 30 frames a second. Right? And then I started working on Alan Wake 2, was leading the VFX and tech art team on that project. And I was involved in a lot of things sort of that were more on the tech art realm, although that is a very funny distinction anyway. So I did a lot of the environmental VFX, but also a lot of shader development and look development. And I was responsible for the vegetation. What does it mean, building a vegetation system for a game from scratch? Well, on one side is all the assets. We did go down a route that we wanted to animate sort of pre-skinned objects at runtime, so we had to rig plants. And that's a problem I had in film before. So somehow I need to put a skeleton in either a pre-made model, or maybe you get something out of SpeedTree, or you even have to create the plant procedurally yourself. So it's a lot of work spent on that. And then developing shader code together with the rendering engineers from the actual engine side, how to actually move that stuff that in the game you can say, now the wind is strong, now the wind is weak, or have wind gusts go through certain areas of the game, or have the player be able to interact with the grass and the bushes and the forest and that type of stuff. And Lua scripting, I don't want to forget about that part, because there's always some kind of scripting involved, and it's either Python or Mel or Lua or Vex. So it's all kind of same. So in the end, you get used to that really quickly, and that was used to sort of just make the button that makes the wind go stronger, basically. I did some water development. That is, developing a water system for all the water surfaces in the game. There's a lot of shader development, including prototyping. And then in-game scripting of creating ripples on water surfaces and where those would actually be happening, and turning on and off the rain that makes ripples on the water and that type of stuff. And lots of traditional VFX. So cinematic work, simulations in Houdini to do simulations. make things explode or break, and then adding sort of having a system that would add in-game particles at the impact times when it actually impacted things and Houdini, that type of stuff. Yeah, and particle and shader effects, gameplay, lure scripting, look development, cinematic, like the whole lot. But that was 3.5 years of work. So there's a very, very broad perspective that gave me a very wide understanding of what is required, and also a lot of opportunity to learn. And I learned a lot in the process, and that's an invaluable experience. And now I have actually moved not too long ago, 6 months ago. I joined Guerilla Games in Amsterdam, and we've just released Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered and Horizon Adventures. Not much else I can talk about at the moment, but still from day to day, my work in film is not all that different than my work in games. So there's Houdini, there's Maya, there's some code stuff, there's reviews and dailies, and there's ambitious projects and milestones and deliveries. And there's always a wildly talented team and a pub around the corner. So what's different in games, really? You ask, well, sometimes it's really not much. It's very similar workflows, tools, and pipelines. If you're kind of okay with trying to find the button in some other spot, you will be fine. You can adapt to just a different software doing the same thing. Because they're all there anyway, like all the pieces of software somewhere around and used in one way, shape, or form or another. But if you really look for the difference to games, and it has been mentioned before, sometimes everything's different. Making games is experience design. And that is something that, coming from film, you go in and you take a pixel out of the shelf and you polish this like 1,000,000 times and you put it back, and you know this is where the pixel stays and this is what people will see. And in games, you just don't. It's all about the experience of how something feels when you're playing it, especially when it comes to the effects and timings and the snappiness and the oomph of a thing, which is sometimes very hard to express in actual actionable items. It's really something you got to play and feel. That's the biggest sort of guideline there. Nothing's ever final, not only because the game changes, but it does. The experience is tweaked all the way until the very end, until the game is shipped. And that doesn't necessarily mean someone changes the gameplay, although that happens also. But there's an engine, there's a piece of software that renders your stuff live every time. So it's not a pixel in an image file. It's a pixel that gets regenerated. So if anything in the line making the pixel changes, your thing looks different. So that causes a lot of like chasing up, rework, and retest. That is a very different approach. Almost at the end, not much more. There's more complexity to everything as the player is in the driver's seat. So you don't really control where the camera is looking, because the player does. And it's a bit more techy. It's definitely more techy because you're making a piece of software, not making sort of a video, a piece of lots of frames on disk, basically. So if you're thinking on applying for a games job, do it. Why? You should lean into your experience to have contributed to some of the most magnificent, touching, highest quality visual pieces of art ever made. So if you have a backdrop in film, that gives you a crazy head start, and it's worth so much that often on the film side, people are just sort of not selling themselves on. But it's an absolute fact that this is a really, really big deal. It's cheesy, but true. You have a trained eye, you know how to tackle difficult challenges in art and technology, you have the proven ability to work to a deadline and under time pressure. You have already learned to deal with an ever-changing field. Learning new stuff is already your thing over the last 10 years. I don't know, when I started making film stuff, there was like 2008, 9 or something, there was like Maya and like lots of that stuff. And now it's like Houdini Land, or maybe even Blender or Unreal, or I mean, Nuke was like, had a great backdrop. Houdini 8 looked terrible back then, and now it's like everything changes all the time. We know how to adapt to that. Changing into games is just another step in that ladder. So what are you waiting for? Become an entertainment engineer. Solve artistic and creative issues with cool tech so people can have fun watching movies or playing games on their sofa in their underwear. The best job in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you. And Johannes is the final one of our speakers. However, it doesn't end there. I'm hoping the people online will hang around because we're going to have a Q&A. But before we do, you've got some pizza to eat. So outside, got a small break of 10, maybe 15 minutes. Eat your pizza, have a loo break, but do come back for the Q&A with all of our speakers. So thank you very much, folks. Okay, we're almost there. Take your seats for the final roller coaster ride of the day. We're going to be about 20 minutes, I think. So it'll be very fast. So I ask the speakers to be quite concise if they can, get their pearls of wisdom out. I'm going to kick off with a question anyway. I have some written down, but I'll open it up to the audience as well. And extra points if you're a panelist and you want to ask a question as well. So Hugo, you sit down. You're a panelist as well. So here's the first question. In VFX, we all have films or TV work we point to as great examples of the peak of the craft of VFX that we'd recommend people watch if they want to understand great VFX. But can you name examples of great games our audience should seek out and play to see how far the art and craft has developed? So let's start off with Ryan.
World of Warcraft, because I played it religiously for 4 years and every time it looked different and you could find something different. Yeah, that's mine.
Okay, I'll say I'm going to say Death Stranding. I'm not a huge fan of the gameplay, to be honest, but it looks amazing. Like, it looks like you're in somewhere like Iceland. So I think, yeah, that would be mine.
I would say Last of Us, because it's such a really amazing narrative game. The gameplay is great. Beautiful game as well, the remake. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
And Stephen.
I can't recommend anything.
You've recommended enough. No, go on.
I was just going to mention, yes, Death Stranding for sure. I think it's one of the best games of the generation. I wanted to recommend, not just because Johannes has worked on it, but I think Alan Wake is one of the best games I've played in a long, long time. And I would also say any Dark Souls games or Elden Ring. I mean, I put 200 hours on Elden Ring already. Like, that game is also stunning if you really want to get transported into an environment. Elden Ring is really the game to go. So
I would say Alan Wake 2 is my game of the year.
Yeah. And Stephen, what about you, Stephen Archibald?
I think if it's a couple of years old at this point, but if you play the game Returnal on PS5, that game is like visual effects, like up the wall. It's all over the place. I mean, it's all over the place in a good way. Like they're constantly going off. And I think the benefit with Returnal is there's some like breakdowns online as well for how they did some of the things within that game. So it looks great, and there's some a little bit of an educational thing you can go find as well in addition to it.
And lastly, Johannes.
Yeah, I mean, all the obvious examples have been said already, like if you take The Last of Us or Death Stranding, or, I mean, without even blowing my own whistle, because I haven't been there when it came out, but even Forbidden West, like Horizon, they're just state-of-the-art in terms of tech and visuals, but you could say Minecraft when it comes to a game that's just sort of a great game, but not necessarily related to our discussion here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now we're talking about in some cases we're talking about transferring careers or changing careers, but I wanted to ask you about sort of getting knocked back, because we all get knocked back from time and time in our careers. How do you recommend people deal with being turned down as they try to move into games? Because, you know, we may get knocked back. How did you learn to deal with rejection every so often? And let's start off with Ryan.
Learn to pivot. I've never really worked in one lane, if I'm honest with you. As a designer, maybe it's a little bit easier. I can sort of pick and choose what I want to do. All my base knowledge sort of covers visual effects, games, graphic design, so I can sort of pivot. But I've also gravitated to what I want to work on at that point. I did games first for 5 years. Every 5 years I sort of change, and then I did movies, back to games, and then TV, and then advertising, which I hated, and then I got back to games. So I just keep moving. It's actually networking. It's more who you know than what you know, to be honest with you. In advertising, you can talk around anything. In maybe games and films, you need to produce something. But I've won pitches without actually showing any work just because I'm passionate about something. So that's one thing I always say to my artists. Anything you do, any idea you bring to the table, be passionate about it and try and convince that person you're talking to that you're so interested in the job that the only person they have to give it to is you. Yeah.
And rejection is part of the game,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's going to happen, but hopefully, sometimes the biggest rejection I've ever got was art school. It took me 3 times to get into the art school I needed to back in Australia. But I just kept doing it, and then it makes you grow, and then you might find something along the journey that you never knew you wanted to do, because you're doing it and doing it again. Rejections, everyone gets rejected in some way or another, don't they?
Great, yeah.
And what creates us, don't it?
And talking about rejection, let's speak to Hugo. Hugo, what do you think? Well, how do you deal with? We all get rejected and knocked back. How do you deal with it?
Well, I mean, I don't take it personally, and especially not only getting rejected, but also getting canceled, like projects getting canceled. That happens all the time, and we don't finish it, or it disappears or vanishes. I mean, you can't really take it personally. This is just the industry as it is. A lot of other people are making decisions. There's a lot of executives and a lot of decisions that have to do with delivering games on a specific time frame, and sometimes that time frame is gone already, and so sometimes the decision is made not to even bother with the game. That happens a lot. I get a bit upset, I get sad for a couple of days, and then I move on and just start the next project. I don't think there's no solution for that, unfortunately,
Yeah. Hey, Len, what about you? How do you deal with rejection?
Well, I've seen it from the other side now, as well as like a hiring manager, and sometimes you get 2, 3 amazing candidates, but one is just more suited to the project that you want to put them on, which that happens a lot, or maybe you just think they'll fit in your team better. So yeah, you shouldn't ever take it personal. It's half the time it's project related, or it's just a team fit.
Yeah, I cried. I remember long time ago, I applied to Habbo Hotel, and I was the last 4 on the interview, and they didn't pick me. And I thought, pixel art is my future, and they didn't pick me. And I was so upset because I thought, that's the door closed for me. And I applied to so many graphic design studios. This is before I even became got a graphic design job. Nobody replied to me because I just had my school portfolio, and it wasn't that great. So it really sucked. But I had to just keep working on my portfolio. Eventually, I did get a job. And then the funny thing was, I then applied for a game UI job, 2 years after that job. And I apparently had applied to that job when I was spamming people with my school portfolio. And they were somehow like, oh, you applied to us before. I didn't know. And I was like, yeah. And then later, I was like, yeah, I really want to work here. I didn't remember because I was just spamming applications. So it does happen, and it does hurt. And, you can't help but, take it a little bit personally because, why not me? But in the end, it's the portfolio. All you can do is just keep working on your portfolio, really, because the portfolio will sell you straight away. Yeah.
Yeah, and where is Habbo Hotel now, right?
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. So
Because they didn't hire Helen.
yeah, exactly. Johannes, what about you? How do you, you must have had rejections in the past. How do you deal with it? How are you resilient?
You just keep going, I think. Actually, I did apply for Guerilla 6 years ago when I tried to move into games. I was like, yeah, let's try it. And they're like, you have no idea about games. You've never touched a game before, so you don't know what you're doing. It's like, cool. Well, 5 years later, it did work. So just keep going. And there's always reasons beyond our control. And then some reasons that are maybe in our control. And maybe it's good to be reflective about that a bit, but also not to obsess. Sometimes it's just timing. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's having a Facebook friend that knows someone, sadly, but also make use of that. Talk to people, and sometimes stuff just happens.
Thank you. Stephen, what about you?
Rejection's always going to be tough. It's not the easiest thing to take, but it's best to maybe not take it too personally, like the other guys have said. I'll add that when I left university to go back to working with CodeSync, that was mainly because CodeSync rejected my VFX through reel. I applied for a VFX job, and they didn't feel I had the chops to kind of work within that field, but they kind of offered me a QA job instead. But and even after that, there was many kind of VFX jobs I applied for that I didn't get accepted for, or didn't even get the first stage of interviews or anything. So there was quite a lot of rejection from me leaving uni to getting to where I am today. But I think for every time I did get rejected, there was always opportunity to kind of find out why and learn a little bit from it. So as hard as it is to hear, maybe like anytime that happens, I feel there's always something to learn from it and take away from it. Then you can just build on and find out kind of why am I getting rejected? Why is this happening? Just essentially just take your time and work on those kind of like areas that I had, like my skill gaps. And eventually, ultimately, if you put something together from learning from all that, you should be able to like to piece all this rejection together into something positive that will hopefully get you that opportunity you're looking for.
Thank you. And one more question before I open it to the audience, and that is, some of us may be sort of like 3/4 of the way there with our skill set to make the move, but just need an extra sort of lift. And maybe you're a bit sick of just using YouTube or finding resources. Do you recommend any courses out there or any places to look for kind of reskilling yourselves? Have you done that yourselves? And let's start with Stephen.
Yeah, I like when like there's the VFX apprentice course, I believe, which is run by the guys from like Riot. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, admittedly, but it was quite helpful in helping me understand a couple like things I didn't know. There's also kind of like I think surrounding yourself maybe in a community like of people who are doing something similar to you. Like there's the VFX Discord, like the real-time VFX Discord, which is full of kind of like from the industry. I think it's run from like people the best of the gaming industry. And there's always opportunities to go in there and like get feedback and understand things and to share information. And I think if you embed yourself in a kind of like an online kind of culture like that, that's also really beneficial as well. That's kind of what I did, and ultimately, probably led to where I am today.
Thank you. And Johannes, what about you? How do you top up your skills? Are there sort of like centres of excellence or places that you can go or courses that you recommend?
Hard to say. I'm not necessarily a big fan of like those courses online. Actually, I've run some myself, to be honest. I learn better by doing. So I don't know. I do random silly little games in Unity in my spare time because I can't get enough of it, obviously. And if I get stuck, then there is YouTube. And then you sort of dig through forums or sometimes Discord and stuff that can be very, very useful. Game jams, if you're on the game side, join a bunch of people, try to make a game in a weekend. So you cut off all the grand ideas of becoming rich and famous with it, and then actually learn something by quickly having to put it together, that type of stuff. So learning from experience, I find, is better for myself, but that doesn't need to suit everyone else.
Thank you. Helen and Hayley, sort of any top-up courses or places that you'd go to get extra skills or that you'd recommend people look at?
So if you want to learn like Unreal Engine, there is a ton of documentation on Epic's website. Like it goes through pretty much every part of Unreal. Personally, I use a lot of Udemy and YouTube. I wanted to learn Blender, so I learned the donut tutorial. Like I think most people know about that one. So yeah, that would be my three recommendations.
No, I use YouTube like all the time for every random tutorial. Like. Yeah, I've been also learning, with learning Unreal is constant learning how to do everything, learning blueprints and everything. And yeah, I just use YouTube all the time and then just patch in sometimes different tutorials together. And like Johannes said, for me, I also need a goal, what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm like, okay, I want to make a menu that triggers in a 3D space. And then that's like my project. And then I try to find tutorials about, okay, how do I do that?
Thanks. And Ryan, are there any sort of places that you recommend people look for teaching and tutorials?
I don't do any sort of upskilling of what I do. I try and do upskilling of what I don't do, if that makes sense, to help me communicate with clients, how to understand the business side of things. Because otherwise, especially when you get to a CD role or as ECD role, that can just bamboozle you. So you need to actually have an idea of what you're dealing with. Maybe that's what your job might get cancelled, but you need to understand why it's been cancelled so it doesn't happen again, that type of thing. To be honest, half my day is bidding, so I've got to work out that side of things, which I have now, but it's most of the time I'm researching of how to get jobs and how to make them better rather than actually what I can do better on a job. And also with the artists I'm working with. Yeah, so that side of things.
Great, thanks. Here's one for Hugo. Hugo, do you recommend Hugo's Desk?
No, I don't. No, I don't think I don't think you're gonna find most of that stuff on my channel. My channel is mostly compositing, but and of course podcasts. But I don't want to repeat I agree with everyone that has spoken so far about this, and I completely agree with all these sources. I wanted just to add something extra to this. I've been finding lately, especially because I deal with a lot of students, that there is a quite big gap and quite big lack of understanding of more core skill related things, fundamentals like photography and composition and lighting. And so I would advise everyone in this room and everyone that's going to watch this video later to try to focus their attention in those core skills, because they will and become a bit more agnostic in terms of softwares and engines and other things. Because I tell you from experience, I've been working since '98, and I've worked on 5 different compositing softwares. They come and go, and there's another one, and there's another one. But the core skill of lighting, photography, and composition never goes away, and that can carry you on any type of business you're going to do, either be gaming or corporate or commercials or shorts. It doesn't really matter. It's filmmaking and it's images, you know. So
great, thanks. I'll open it up now to the audience. Does anybody have questions? If you do, speak, and then we'll paraphrase it for the microphone. Oh, can you? That's great, thanks. So let's just see. Has anybody got a question? Hopefully a question that everybody can answer. I've got loads of questions, so I'm quite happy if there's one at the back. Yes, thank you. Just wait now for the mic, the roving mic.
You mentioned bidding. I'm curious to know, like a 1-minute version of how bidding is different.
That work with the producer, but it's also understanding of, which comes from experience, how long things take, because it all comes down, like, I just bid out a 10-episode TV show for Apple today and yesterday. And it's the 3rd time I bid it, just because you're trying to crunch down. You know, it's all that sort of stuff. Your first bid is never the thing that's going to go out. And then you get the art department replaying back to you. But also you need to describe things in every detail, like all the notes you get that are aligned with the script, all that sort of stuff, days it takes, but then the assumptions that you have, I will get this from you, that you'll give me back, I will do this for you. If you don't put that sort of little detail in it, it can be taken the wrong way by the client. And that's down on paper. That's emailed. They've got it. They will stick to that, which sucks. And it happens a lot. So that's the side of things. And also if rates, like the rate card thing, like the mill, totally different rate card than here. NPCs, totally different rate card than here. But that's because they're a large company, so they can spread the costings to everywhere. This is a small company, so our rate card is higher. So I've got to work backwards from that. There's all these little things that, and also game sort of stuff. Okay, an Unreal artist costs this much. I need to bid a little bit back. And I put 10% on top of that for my feedback costs. There's little things that come from experience, and then working with a producer that maybe they can help you on that client side of things, and then how to talk to a client once that's in front of them, and how to get it across that, okay, it's going to cost this much because of this, you know what I mean? So, yeah, there's a lot of little details that you need to get, that it just comes from experience. Though,
I'm familiar with bidding in film. I was just wondering how different it is in gaming compared to film.
It's, there's a lot more iteration in gaming. A lot of back and forth, because there's not one port of call. Like in film and TV, there's a director and a production designer. In games, there's an art director, creative director, maybe a director, but then there'll be a cinematic director. And there's multiple ports of call. And then also the board. Sometimes I've worked with gaming companies that have a board, which is nuts. But yeah, they're calling the shots on stuff. It depends on what you do.
Thank you. Johannes, can you have you got anything to add to that about bidding? Any experience of bidding?
Not really. I'm on the execution end of things.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. And Stephen?
What is the question? Sorry, about bidding for?
Yeah, it's about bidding for games and and the difference between games and VFX.
Yes, I think I'm this. So I'm on the execution side, so it's not something I've really been a part of, to be honest. I think that's all left up to the much higher ups who are many levels above me in different fields. But
Okay, great. No problem at all. Thank you very much. Another question from the audience. There's one over here. I'll get to it before you will, Hugo.
Thank you. What's your opinion about virtual production? Is it a hype at the moment?
Okay, let's try Ryan again. Hold on, Ryan.
I've got a friend who works in it for years as well. Marcus, do you know Marcus? Yeah. So he's working on a bit. He works for Disney now, and that's all he does, and he loves it. It's good to a point. Like I worked on Mandalorian as well, and it worked really well with that. But that worked really well because art department and virtual production worked together. So half the sets were touching, were the props, and then behind that you had the virtual production. So it worked together well. When you've just got a virtual set, it never really works. But we use it in advertising a lot, to be honest with you. Virtual sets, yeah, they use them in car companies love that shit because the light on the cars makes everything look sexy. Lighting on people never really works because it looks fake. It doesn't. It gives you that stale look. It's not warm. That's why you need a prop to diffuse the light. That's why it worked in Mandalorian so well. It's getting better. It's just like friggin' everything. It's just like people just take it to a next step, or they add some sort of bit. Like Marcus is doing some weird stuff. Like he's doing motion capture with it there, so the motion capture guys can see the environment happening at the same time. Like he might not do a virtual set in the final thing, but he's using the mocap with the guys on set and that virtual production, so they sort of get an essence of it rather than being in an empty room with a few with like a chair there and stuff like that. So yeah, it's all different ways of using it.
I would add about this regarding because last year I did a commercial with LED screens for Zeiss. I didn't talk about it on my talk because it was too short. I couldn't put any more things there. But it was really difficult because it was a commercial, and so we didn't really had a lot of time to develop things. And so I would tell everyone to be very careful when they go into an LED projection-based project. Although we were using the biggest stage in Germany, we were using a really great stage there. It was still very difficult because the production is still used to working on a normal production. So they will only give you like 1 day of pre-light or 1 day of tech rec. And they don't really understand sometimes that you need several days to test everything out on the screens, to test all the frame rates, to test the cameras are working, if the tracking is working properly, putting extra lights like you said. So it was incredibly difficult to do the project. It didn't turn out as good as we thought it would. So I would just recommend everyone, if they ever get involved on LED stage, just make sure you put enough time of pre-production before you get there, because half of the work is done before you even start shooting. Like that's the mindset people have to have. That's the only way it works well. And that's why LM is successful with it, because they put the time on it. If you don't put the time and you think it's going to be a solution that works really good and on that minute, it will fail miserably. It will not really work.
You can fake it though. Like we did the Formula One title sequence for the last one, and that's fake virtual production. But we worked out the dimensions of the room, where the camera position is. We worked at the angles. There's a lot of pre-production into it. The cameraman didn't stick to those friggin' rules, but half of it looks pretty good, and it's a fake virtual production. But it's more the fall off of the light. Like we had light behind the camera and the light coming off the LED screens, which, lit the drivers themselves. So you can't that's not high res enough, but if you work out the lighting and the position of the cameras, you can fake it. But yeah, it's not the proper one.
And VP is a whole range of other tools as well. Everybody tends to think of the large screens, etc. But there's also things like virtual scouting, etc., etc. I just wanted to ask Johannes if he's had experience of VP and what he thinks of it as a source of employment and a source of stability.
Well, I guess having worked on Gravity, that's sort of one of the early days where that type of text being used. But it only again from the post-production end, it was amazing for us to actually see what we're working with, because you kind of have a closer integration between what then in 3D will happen with what has happened inside. But the reality is they had to make the entire film before they shot anything with that. So it changes the process entirely. And but that's the only insight I have on that. So people need to work more prepared, closer together. And sometimes that might feel like it's stifling, a director's creativity to just flip everything around on the spot, because that can make things really hard if you want to do that in that type of scenario.
Thank you. I think we've got a follow-up question here.
Follow-up question. So this is not necessarily about virtual production, but about crowd simulation and volumetric capture. What's your opinions about volumetric capture, and where do you see the market coming in? Because there is certainly a lot of hype since the 2020s about scanning people, but where do you see it nowadays?
Let me get to Ryan with my mic.
I was at NPC 10 years ago, and every company has a virtual human generator, and it's evolved so many times over that iteration. So sports things, love it. You know what I mean? Like, I've worked Ridley a couple of times. We just watched Gladiator again with my kids the other day. That's got no virtual people in it. It's all, except for the 2 Colosseum shots. Now the next Gladiator, all virtual. You know what I mean? So, which sucks because there's no essence into the shots anymore. I think the Mill and NPC have virtual crowd simulators for each, and then they did I think they did every stadium in the world simulator too. So there is money in it because everyone asked for it, but it just looks really fake. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think they did the Channel 4 Paralympics commercial, and everyone was in that except for the athletes was virtual. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, and they won heaps of awards for it, but if you look at it now, it looks really fake. You know what I mean? So it's still got a way to go. Like Ghost in the Shell, we did. So I was the lead visual effects designer on that. All the advertisements, we scanned all the people in, I don't know, what do they call it again? All the cameras thing. And that was animated as well. So we used that as a sort of animated GIF sort of style, but in volumetric sort of style for all the advertisements. So that worked fantastic. You know what I mean? We didn't need to do anything. We just played around with how those people resolved and not. I think stuff like that works because it's not real. You know what I mean? It's a hologram. It's a graphic representation of something. Once you start getting into real side of things, it has to be so far back that it just looks like blotches. You know what I mean? But I don't understand why they don't use cards. So
I fully share your opinion about it, but
clients love it though.
I know. But for game design, because obviously the talk is about.
Well, have you seen NVIDIA's virtual NPC?
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. I worked on so we did the brand film for Jara Sparks, who was a new games company coming out. Well, they came out last year. They're all a Chinese company put into a lot of money to set up this company. They headhunted all the lead people from Halo, from 343 Industries. So start this. They're using that, and AI is driving the narrative for all of that, and their characters. So it's like a chat GPT. You talk to a chat GPT NPC, and it replies with you for their guidelines. None of it's scripted. It's all AI is replying to you. So they give a guide. They built a guidelines of the narrative. If you go to talk to someone, has a set of guidelines to talk to you, and then that's the reply, which is nuts to me. But they're actually, I'm not allowed to say what they're doing more of that sort of stuff, but you will go to a level, your actions on that level, when you come back to the level you've just been to, are changed because of the action you're doing. So anytime you play this game, it's different. And I don't know where they've got to it from this point of view, because this was about 1.5 years ago, but that's probably changed and gotten better than what their baseline was. So it's changing all the time. Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to ask Hayley and Helen. Are digital humans sort of volumetric capture, crowd sims part of your world, or is that more for the AAA side of things?
I mean, games mostly still face scan people, so they get real models in, real actors, because they want a specific look, and they pick from, like, Helen's been choosing actors recently, but now we've got things like MetaHuman as well. So with things like NPCs, I can see a lot of them being generated by MetaHuman.
Yeah, and with some games as well, the actor also might do the mocap, might do the voice, so it's like a full production. So usually you want to get the real actor scanned in, just so when they are doing the voiceovers, the muscles and everything really matches, and you can capture like the actual essence of the person. So yeah, like as far as I know, we still do a lot of scanning. Yeah.
Thanks. And Johannes and Stephen, crowd sims, digital humans, volumetric scanning, is that part of your world, Stephen?
No, it hasn't been yet, but not to say it's not going to be in the future, you never know. But yeah, like within games, it seems to be what's already been said there. Like it's mainly like the face scanning so far, the metahumans and Unreal. And I guess you've seen an increase in kind of like crowd simulations. I know like the Hitman games and like way back when were one of the first examples of huge crowd simulations in games, and more modern ones as well. But it doesn't necessarily dive into what I'm doing at the moment. So it's not much I can say, unfortunately.
Johannes?
Same, not really involved in the character side of things. I wonder, I'm familiar with that virtual NPC, which is really cool, but then think about it, your game's starting to talk back. The whole thing just going to feel like real world, way too close, and you're going to be like, oh my God, game must be shut up. So I'm not sure if that's really what's going to fly, but who knows? It sounds really exciting if you think like the next Elden Ring comes out, you always expect it has to have that, but it doesn't have that world.
There was that story that came out a couple of weeks ago. Well, there was that story came out a couple of weeks ago where the AI actually said, you should die because I don't like who you are as a person. So they are answering back in weird and wonderful ways. So
yeah, the ethics of it are a whole different game, because suddenly it's still an NPC and you probably have to shoot them or something, right? So there's a whole complicated scenario around this that needs to be figured out first before you can really unleash this as a product. But fascinating.
And on that fascinating note, maybe there's room there for a VES session in the future about this whole area. We've run out of time. It's 9:30. We're very grateful to Territory for allowing us to go over. I hope the audience also enjoyed the session, and also the pizza and the beer. There may well be some left for all I know. I thought I ate most of it, but nevertheless, there's still some more. So I'd like to thank the VES for organising this. Ricardo, you've got a few closing words. Come on down.
Most of all, wow, great presentations. And your insights and dedication have truly inspired us tonight. To everyone who joined us, thank you for bringing your energy and passion. And to finish in a clear way and faster, I hope to see you at the next VES events. Thank you so much.
And just one last thing, just like to thank all our speakers, Johannes and Stephen out there in the ether. Thank you so much for your presentations and your knowledge. I'd like to thank Hayley, Helen, Ryan and Hugo. And have I missed anybody? I'm not sure. But anyway, thank you very much for turning up there, dear audience. And we'll see you at the next one. Thank you very much. I think Hugo wants to take a final picture of us all, just to prove it happened.
Yes. Is that okay? Okay, so I'm going to go more to the middle here. And okay, so don't worry, this is going to be fine. It's going to be harmless. So you just need to make sure you can see the lens, so don't get covered by it, and then I'll send you the 360. Okay? So say cheese. Cheese. Okay, one for safety, since we're all from VFX, we're always doing for safety. So say cheese. It's still loading. Okay, cheese again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.